And there are hearing system devices over on the counter just outside in the other hall. Perhaps because I just came back from being on retreat for the last couple of weeks, what's on my mind is my body. And, or what's in my body is my mind. And one of the surprises for me in my years of Buddhist practice is the degree to which my body has become a home, as body's become a rich area to rest the awareness in, to be present in, and how much the body, or the experience of the body, is affected by the mind. And then as the mind changes, the body changes. And when I was kind of first discovering this in practice, I'm kind of, I don't think it's, maybe other people have said this too, but I didn't know it, I just kind of made it up. I talked about sometimes I would experience my karmic body, and sometimes I experienced a dharmic body. And sometimes when I got to meditation, I would leave my karmic body behind for a little while. And then after the meditation over, I'd go back into it. And so it was fascinating to do this process and to learn that how much what goes on in the mind influences how we experience our body. I think when I was quite young, I would never have assumed that. I thought that whatever experiences I had in the body, the pains and pleasures of my body, were just kind of like, that's just how it is. But to discover that pleasure and pain are very much influenced by what the mind is doing, the concepts the mind has about it, the associations, the memories, the values, the all kinds of things, that the perspectives, even the perceptions the mind has affects the experience of pleasure and pain. And so does the state of the mind. And that's where meditation comes in partly, is to watch the state of the mind change as we meditate. And as that happens, the experience of the body changes as well. And it's quite an educational experience to have. And for one thing, it puts a question mark next to our experiences of our body, what our body is. Not a few people are quite oppressed by their body, struggle with their body. And I don't want to minimize how difficult that is, the challenges of that. But but to have access to understand that the inner experiences are variable, and so not to reify the particular experience we have as this is it, this is, maybe make some final conclusion, but to be able to look at the mind and understand the mind's influences and how it's possible to change the mind and the mind's attitudes and views and all kinds of things, and the mind state, and how that then shifts and changes how we experience the body. So much so that if you go back to the ancient teachings of the Buddha, he had an interesting, I find an interesting word for body. It was kaya. And it's particularly interesting to compare it with the other words for body used at the time of the Buddha. Because some of the ways he used it, it's kind of second most common word probably used for body, was a word called sarira in Sanskrit. And I first learned about the word because people use it to mean a relic Like some great teacher dies and they cremate the body and there's relics found and they save the relics. It's the sharira. But it refers to the physical body just as a physical entity. So like a corpse, the word for corpse is sarira. And, or at least that's how it's translated into English. So a corpse is a body that's not animated with anything. The mind is not active in the dead body. And so all you have is the dead body. And so this word sarira kind of is applied to just the body, the physical body, without any, just as a thing, as a hunk. I don't know what technical word you can use. However, that's not the word that the Buddha uses when he's talking about meditation practice. In meditation practice, he uses the word kaya. And kaya, the meanings of that word in meditation can shift and change, but it has to do with the body that's experienced, the experienced body. And experience means it's felt, we feel it. And the feelings we have in the body are not just purely physical events. The qualities of them, the intensity of them, their associations, many things associated with them have to do with what goes on in our mind. So I'll give you a few examples in the Buddha's meditation teachings. He put a tremendous emphasis on mindfulness of the body. And there are three, and also mindfulness itself. That's many people now in the modern world associate Buddhist meditation with mindfulness. And he had three discourses, three teachings, where he gave instructions in mindfulness. That was the primary focus of the discourse. Each of them begins with the same instruction. And that instruction is, when you're breathing, know whether the breaths are long or whether they're short. That's the first instruction. The second instruction that all these they share is while you're breathing, as you're paying attention to your breathing in meditation, experience your whole body, the entire kaya. So that's nice, just to kind of tune into your body. And then the next instructions that's shared by all these, as you're breathing in and breathing out, relax your bodily formations. So the idea of being aware of your long and short breaths has a lot to do with the fact that the state of your mind can affect how you breathe. Many people find that as they calm down in meditation, the breathing gets slower. Their breathing tends to become not as long, it becomes shorter, more subtle, more quiet. When the mind gets excited, the breathing picks up, and it can breathe quite hard. And so how we breathe can be seen as being affected by what goes on in the mind. But many people have discovered that if you focus on your breathing, that calms the mind. So there's this reciprocal relationship between breathing and the mind. Focus on the breathing, the mind calms down. The mind calms down, the breathing calms down. So there's, right in the beginning instructions of the Buddhas in mindfulness, you see this at play, is this reciprocal relationship between the body and the mind. The next instructions about feeling the whole body and then calming or relaxing the body is on the bodily formations. That part, those bodily formations, the bodily activities, the muscles that are held and tensions we have, that can be calmed. What can be calmed in our body are those tensions. The tensions we carry in our body, for the most part, originate in the mind. And maybe we can say a little bit simplistically that the tensions in the mind are often transferred into the body. And the chronic tension becomes, quite hard muscles that stay frozen. And so as we start feeling the whole body in meditation, one of the things we become aware of is the holding patterns in the body, how we hold ourselves tense. Maybe the shoulders are up high, the belly's held in. There might be tensions in the face, around the eyes and the jaw that people start discovering. And the Buddha's instruction is when you start discovering that held tension in your body, to relax it. as that relaxes, that changes the mind. That tends to relax the mind, calm the mind. And so we see this kind of, so the kaya, the mental formations, the bodily formations that we're relaxing, is the body that's been influenced by what goes on in the mind. The mind is tense, the body gets tense. The mind relaxes, some of this bodily stuff relaxes as well. So what I'm trying to point out here is that there's this interplay between the mind and the body, that the thing that the Buddha the word he commonly used for body is not the physical body, but it's this experience, the experience we have of the body that's an interplay of the workings of the mind and the body. This gives a lot of hope to people's experience in their body, because it doesn't mean that their body is a fixed thing, and the body experience, their pain, their pleasure is fixed, and you're just stuck with what you have. We have some ability to change, adjust, what our own experience of the body is. And I've known people, and I've had it, who have experienced a lot of pain and have used meditations to ameliorate the pain. And there's a variety of different ways in which meditation and mindfulness shifts our relationship to pain. But one of the ways is that if you can get into a meditation state, you can really get into the meditation, that tends to change the quality of the mind. And as the state of the mind changes, the experience of how the body changes as well. So I'll give some examples again from the teachings of the Buddha. When he taught concentration meditation, he instructed people to enter into 4 different states of meditative absorption, where you really get absorbed and you're no longer thinking about what's for dinner or why did you leave the dirty dishes in the sink to come to IMC, or whatever your mind is kind of involved in. And so these 4 absorptions really get involved deeply into it. When that happens, when you get into these absorptions, they're mental states of focus, concentration, unified concentration states. This begins to change the experience of the body. And some of the things that begin happening is there's a lot of pleasure in the body that comes from it. The first thing that's often described is experiences of joy and pleasure, or joy and happiness that begin coursing through the body, appearing in the body. And so the Buddha's instructions was this, he said, when this joy and happiness in the body arises, spread it, spread it, saturate it, pervade it, soak it into the whole body. What a trip. Can you believe it? If you're feeling a little bit of joy and delight and pleasure in your body, go all out and spread it throughout your body. That's a little bit surprising instructions. But that's what people can do when the mind gets settled enough and concentrated enough. And, it's probably, I don't have the science accurately, but some people think it has to do with something like dopamine. That somehow when the mind gets focused, it's no longer distracted, no longer scattered, and really absorbed in one thing, it brings a sense of well-being that can feel physical. And it's a common phenomenon. I mean, you don't have to meditate to do that. People who do a craft will feel that, or play an instrument, or read a nice book. There's kind of nice feelings that can come sometimes. And so these things start arising, and then the idea is to spread it throughout the body. This joy and pleasure then originates in the state of the mind. As these go through these 4 different states of absorption, the same instructions, suffuse it, spread it throughout the body. Except the 4th one, which is the deepest state of this kind of absorption, there it's a little bit simpler what it says, and no longer talks about joy and pleasure, but it talks about the clarity or brightness of a pure mind. Pure mind is a mind which is not agitated by anything, and so it's freed of agitation, freed of of disturbances, of anxieties and worries and all kinds of things. And that produces a sense of clarity or brightness in the mind. The instructions are to suffuse that clarity throughout the body so no part of the body is not felt, doesn't feel that clarity. Isn't that curious kind of instruction? To spread that clarity throughout the body. Some people who do this in deep meditation will say that they don't really experience their body anymore. But they certainly, I think what they're saying, sometimes they have no experience of body at all, but sometimes they report that their physical body and the boundaries of the body fall away, but there's this kind of glow of light or clarity, or there's a really nice feeling that's there, that's kind of really, beautiful, that goes on. So here again, we see this idea that the mind and body are intimately related. The experience of the body and the mind are intimately related. As the mind gets concentrated and these feelings like joy and pleasure arise, that spread throughout the body. That mental clarity or mental brightness, as that gets developed, can also be spread and suffused and kind of enter into the whole body. So that when this happens, people feel like they have a very different experience of their body than what they have in ordinary life, when what I call their karmic body is operating. It gives people a feeling of confidence, a feeling of peace, a feeling of being at home, a feeling of safety, a feeling like everything is good here, right here in the body. The body provides kind of the message that everything is good right now. It might not be good outside the walls of where you're meditating. There's all kinds of challenges in the world. But to really feel that, things are good, it's right here. No matter what difficulties have been, in other times and places. Or, just, anywhere. To feel that is a re-education process of the body. For the body to begin registering a capacity of feeling kind of at home in itself and comfortable in itself and safe and warm and cozy, can not only re-educate the body, but it re-educates the mind. It re-educates us from the conditioning that many of us receive from a lot of difficult things that happen in life. Tragedies happen, violence happens to people, great suffering happens, accidents happen to the body. And, this conditioning can be very, very deep. I've had accidents, and some of the accidents I've had that were, decades ago, sometimes when I remember it, I still feel sometimes a little twang or twinge in my body, like, ooh, something. And so these things kind of remain. But we get a certain kind of education if we live in fear all the time. And it gets translated to the body, right? The experienced body is partly shaped by the mind. If fear is mostly if you see it mostly as a mental phenomena, but it really courses through our body as well. It's experienced through the body, in the body as well. So there's this thing about not being able to separate the body and the mind. The reciprocal, they work together, is built into this Buddhist word, kaya. And so to re-educate the body, to kind of change it and soften it and learn a whole different way of being and feel at home in there, rather than looking out in the world for sensual pleasures. Looking out in the world out there is going to do something nice for me. To be able to experience inner pleasure, delight, and joy without having had a good meal, without having to have a good drink, without having to have, I don't know if I dare say sex, because then you won't listen to me anymore. And without having a massage or having nice things. Which, is nothing wrong with those things automatically, but to think that that's where happiness is going to come from, we know is kind of a dead end. Pleasure is not happiness. But to start feeling this goodness and warmth and certainly pleasure, happiness, joy inside that's not dependent on winning the lottery or getting a nice car or nice food or a nice date or whatever, sensual pleasure that's out there in the world can provide. It changes our priorities. Hopefully it doesn't make us a hermit, that we're self-contained, but we're no longer looking into the world for our needs to be met or our pleasures to be attained so much. We can feel more complete and full right here. And so then it gets a little bit more interesting, because this word kaya, being this the experience body that's influenced partly by the mind, there are times when the physical body seemingly falls away, and there's still a sense of a body, but it's more like a mind-made body. It's a body which seems to kind of not really be recognizable as your physical body. Some people report it as just a glowing vibration, a warmth, this effusing warmth that goes everywhere, that reaches out kind of without any boundaries. So it's, I don't know if it's infinite, but it feels like it's, it has no boundaries, just beyond the boundaries of our skin. And some people kind of see it as light, that they feel like they have a light body or something. And it's kind of fascinating that our experience of the body is so malleable, can be changed so much. One of the reasons I'm kind of going on like this is that it's a little bit, not so much that you're supposed to go into these altered states and have this, light body or whatever we can experience. They're all kind of, products of mental states. It's not like we have this ethereal body exactly that's separate from who we are, but it just, as the mind state changes, so does the way we experience the body. So one of the reasons I'm going on like this is that, so to encourage you not to stay stuck in your karmic body. That the body that you carry around with you that's full of tension and holding things and maybe fear kind of in your body, you don't have to go around like that all the time. You're going around like that certainly because things happen to you and maybe terrible things happen to you, but it's also happening because of how you then continue to engage your mind. To focus, we can focus too much with certain attitudes, and those attitudes get translated in how we experience the body. We focus a certain way by prioritizing certain perceptions, and we single out from our field of awareness certain things that we think are important to pay attention to. We have certain reactions to life and to our physical body and our things, and so where sometimes people are at odds with themselves, in conflict with their body. We have expectations and values of what's important, and so it shouldn't be what I'm having. It should be different. I should have a different experience than what I'm having, and it's not right that I'm having what it is. And so there's all these ways that we get fixating these ideas and judgments about where our body is at. That often, easy enough, I think, can keep kind of a frozen attitude or frozen mind state that keeps the experience of the body, I don't know, we're kind of stuck in it. Meditation is meant to free us from being stuck. And so one of the ways to begin this process is to, I think supports this process, is the loosening up of the body, the experience of the body, soften the holding pattern, which means that we're playing with a reciprocal relationship between the mind and the body. And so we're softening, relaxing the body as we begin relaxing the mind. Here's an interesting example that I was reminded of recently. I think it's to the point. About the difference between being caught up and not caught up in the mind, and what the body does. When I was, many years ago, when I was a Zen student, we would sit in the meditation hall. We'd sit on platforms like this one here. Everyone had one. They were really big ones. And we would sit facing the wall. And so your back was near the edge of this kind of like a platform like this. And so someone could walk by you, and they're walking right by, your back. Well, during the meditation period, the teacher would sometimes walk around the hall, and if in Zen they like, really, straight postures. So if the posture wasn't really straight, or, a little bit slumped or something, the teachers would come and adjust your posture to help you out. And I remember they would do it quite kindly, because they would first gently put their hand on my shoulder, and then I knew they were there. And then they would gently kind of put their hand on my lower back or my shoulder and kind of move things a little bit. So it was, I appreciated it. But what was interesting was sometimes I would feel the hand on my shoulder, and I had the startled response. And sometimes the hand would go on my shoulder, and I was like putty. I was like, oh, okay. It's kind of like I would just go with it, or just kind of melt with the hand, and no resistance. So what was the difference between being startled and just being really soft and just... Both times I had no idea it was coming. It came out of the blue. The difference was that when I was startled, I was always thinking. And when I wasn't startled, I wasn't really thinking. I wasn't caught up in my thoughts. That was the difference. So the body reacts, behaves in different ways depending on what goes on in the mind. And so if we keep thinking the same thoughts over and over again, especially negative kind of thoughts, it can have a negative impact on the body. If you can have positive thoughts, that sometimes can have positive influence in the body. But if you cannot think at all, with a soft, nice body, that does a very, very different effect on the body. It's very wonderful and sweet. So then finally, I'd like to say that this idea of the tradition talks about suffusing the sense of well-being through the body, spreading it through the body. One of the things I've learned from that is to expand my experience, my sense, my feeling or sense or understanding or perception of my body so that it becomes bigger. When I'm involved in certain thoughts, certain ideations, certain self-concepts, certain concerns, my sense of my body tends to shrink and become smaller. And certain emotions also, I've noticed, when I have certain emotions, I tend to kind of gather myself around that emotion inside. So for example, if I'm feeling sad, I might, I kind of like prioritize the sad. I have an attitude like, oh, poor me or something. And I somehow, one way or the other, I tend to kind of find myself kind of gathered in, close in to this little bundle of sadness that I might feel somewhere. And what I've learned to do is to bring my awareness right into the middle of all these feelings I have in my body and allow them, and the word allow is a very important part of this. I don't make it, I allow it. Allow it to kind of spread outward. Allow it to kind of, one idea I have sometimes is that I'm allowing these things that are inside to rest outwards into what's holding it. Like if there's a bag of skin, let it go out and just rest in the bag. So like a spread and kind of expand and be held, or expand and not be contracted, and then things like sadness begin to spread and become larger, and it tends to be a lot easier to hold it kindly and in a wise way as it spreads outwards and just kind of bigger. And then, oddly enough, being absorbed and focused on something even like sadness and having it spread, in the middle of it, there's feelings of goodness that arise. Something feels really nice in the middle of it because it's kind of been set free, or something's been freed up or loosened up inside because I'm not holding to it. And then what I know then is that as I keep focusing on the body and feeling it, spreading it, allowing it to expand, is that my mind begins to soften as well. And my mind starts feeling some of that goodness as well. as my mind softens, that feels the goodness, that changes how I experience my body. How I experience my body changes how I experience my mind. And this reciprocal biofeedback system is one of the systems that supports meditators in getting absorbed, getting involved, getting really concentrated, being right here in this body at this time, because it's so good. It feels so right. It feels so healthy. It feels so true. When we don't have that feedback system, biofeedback system, and we have our thoughts and our concerns and our judgments and preoccupations we go into, we actually then are separating ourselves from the body, from the experienced body, from this mind-body kind of cooperative system. And so it can't really function in a harmonious way or in a healthy way if we're too far removed from it. So to have a biofeedback system that encourages us not to go off and wander off in thought, but come back and be present in a kind of quiet way with a bodily experience, feeling it, sensing it, opening to it, is quite helpful. And so that was a little bit of what I've learned in mindfulness of the body. Mindfulness, lessons that were learned partly, to a great extent, through a lot of pain. I've learned to sit with a lot of pain in this body as well. And that's what I've learned from that is kind of opened up to this wider thing. So I kind of end with that. Maybe that's a downer to end like that. But I end with that just so that you don't think that it's just a, easy highway to what I'm talking about. That a lot of what we're doing in this practice is really being present for what's true for us and what's going on. And if that's pain, then we learn to work with that and find a different relationship to the pain. And because the pain and the mind are so closely related, as we learn to have a different relationship to the pain changes. As the pain changes, the mind changes, and we have this reciprocal thing happening again. So we have about 10 minutes, and I'd like to hear any questions or concerns you might want to ask or about this topic.
So my question is about your last comment about learning from the pain. And I'm really intrigued by that because when I watch those I love or friends of mine who have been in great pain, whether it's physical pain or emotional pain or both, from either an illness or a tragedy, I'm really intrigued about the lesson that comes from the pain. So maybe you can talk a little bit about that.
I think probably there's many lessons a person could have. The one that I kind of, in responding to you or thinking right now that I think I'd like to highlight is lessons about our relationship to the pain. So not some big, what it means for our life, but rather, what is our relationship to that pain? Are we resisting it? Are we hating it? Are we running away from it? Are we blaming someone for it? Are we caught up in fantasy? Are we going into fantasy in order to distract us from it? There's all these strategies people have when they're uncomfortable in pain that are not so healthy. And to be able to see those, learn about those unhelpful strategies, and then to learn some helpful ways and healthy ways to be present for pain is one of the great gifts that I've had from this practice. So that's one lesson. And then some people learn from pain That, see, pain, I think of pain as a signal that something needs our attention. So, I think that pain should always be respected, but it isn't necessarily the pain itself that needs our attention. Sometimes it's our relationship to it, or other things. But sometimes, we learn from pain that, I better shift my posture, or I should walk in a different way, or something physically needs to change as well. So that's also lessons that we can have from it if we really pay attention. I've had that sometimes where I've had difficulties with walking, and I had to pay really careful attention to understand, what was I doing? How was I holding myself when I walked? And so I can find a way to walk that didn't have pain. So I don't know if that's what you had in mind, but if you want to ask again about why, or say something else about why you're asking.
I have a follow-up question. What if the pain is from distress?
What's the pain?
What if the pain comes from distress?
The pain from distress?
From being distressed, or
the pain from being distressed.
Distressed. How would you recommend changing your relationship with the distress?
Well, I think that the core mindfulness thing is to turn your attention to the experience of distress, not the thoughts about distress, the stories, but rather the felt sense experience of it. And then I love the analogy or the metaphor. Imagine your awareness as two hands that make a cup together, and they come underneath and hold the distress, as if it has permission to be there. And then just be with it and sense it and feel it, as if it's never had an opportunity to be seen and known before. And then see what happens. Give it time to show itself to you. It's a powerful process, because distress is partly something like distress. Chances are distress is not a unitary, singular thing. It's probably a composite of different attitudes, beliefs, other emotions, ideas of self and other. All kinds of things come into play. Values, memories, predictions of the future. And so if you can just hold it without trying to fix it or react to it, and just take a really good look at it, it might begin to open up and show you its component parts, until you can maybe find the pivotal point that maybe is holding it all together.
Thank you.
Yeah, I have a question about pain when somebody has a chronic illness that's ongoing, or when somebody's in the dying process. I had read in the Tibetan book of Living and Dying that pain can be a deep purification process. Do you know anything about that, or have any thoughts on that?
So pain is a purification process. It's a fairly common Buddhist idea that purification process. We have all these things that we hold inside of us. We have tension, we have attachments, we have memories that are held tight and haven't been released or resolved, and we have difficult memories of things we've done that are sometimes buried deep inside. All kinds of things. Who knows? All kinds of things. And so as we meditate, we start going through layers of the mind, and we start encountering these places where these difficult things are held. And so the process of freeing ourselves from that sometimes is painful, or distressing, or challenging, or in different ways. And if the pain is because of that purifying process, the emptying process, freeing process, then it's considered a purification process that you should allow for. So that's one way. The pain itself represents the holding. But when some chronic illnesses and injuries and dying things, some of the pain is just pure physiological intensity that I wouldn't associate it with our karma or our background. I think that itself does a disservice for people. Then it's more complicated than it needs to be, I think. And whether it's a purifying process to be with that pain depends a lot about how we practice with the pain. If it's like what I talked about earlier, if we're learning from that how not to be so reactive, if we're discovering how to be peaceful with the pain, that might be a really useful lesson. The pain doesn't go away, but we might have learned to be peaceful with it. And I've had the experience, I've known lots of people whose pain hasn't gone away. The edges sometimes go away, but the pain doesn't go away, but they learn how to hold it spaciously. They learn how to be peaceful with it. I've had very intense pain and intense joy at the same time. So, pain doesn't have to be the only thing that's present. So maybe that's a kind of purification process. Maybe if the reactivity we have around pain is too big, it needs to be resolved before we die. But I'm reluctant to make that kind of a general statement about that this is how it should be. I think every dying is unique.
Thank you.
Do we have time for one more? I'd like to hear from her because I've never heard from her. But Trudy, you'll have another chance.
Thanks.
Sure. What? You guaranteed.
I've been working with the pain in my body through Qigong, and I just want to make sure that I'm not applying the wrong principles to meditation. Because I'm really new to meditation. So, is there an order of things? Like, should one work on concentration and calming the mind before you go into the pain? What I'm noticing, because during this meditation, I was working with the pain in the way I know how, which is holding it in, loving acceptance and not asking it to go away and just giving it all my attention. But there is totally a part of my mind that wants it to go away. So the whole time it just felt like a struggle. And then after a while I was like, I'm just going to try that feeling the breath on my nose thing, So anyway, is there an appropriate order to this?
I think it's also very personal, what works for different people, what's the right order for an individual. But I think that because we're here, we're kind of a mindfulness specialty here. The general principle in mindfulness is to not try to get rid of anything, but rather to learn how to hold it in non-reactive awareness. And and some people are trying to get rid of pain, and I've practiced a long time practicing in order to get rid of my pain. And I found in the end it was actually much more transformative not to get rid of it, but learn how to hold it in a non-reactive way. And then all kinds of other lessons would come out of it. And so with that principle, if you have intense back pain when you're sitting here, that becomes a meditation.
Secondary question is, my mind is saying, oh, you don't have concentration if, because the pain moves sometimes. If you do hold it acceptingly, it shifts, and now you got a new spot. My mind is like, well, you're not developing concentration because you're moving all over the place. Is that true, or is my mind full of it? Per usual.
I like it that you're asking the question. That's the kind of questioning that a meditator should do. And I think the person who should answer that is you. It's a little bit hard for me to know, exactly what's going on in your mind. But I think that you're asking the right question. And I suspect that if you, one of the important things about this kind of meditation practice is to learn how to become your own teacher around these things. So since you're asking a good question, I would prefer just to turn the mirror back on you and see if you can find your way with it. And one of the ways to find your way is trial and error. You try something and see if that works. So if you think you're not, anyway, just try different things.
I'll stay close to that question. Thanks.
Great. So I hope all of you will give your body a second chance, or a third chance, or new chance to come to love it. And it'll love you back if you kind of learn to settle in and really be present for it in a nice way. Thank you.